Across the Philippine archipelago, a dramatic transformation is underway, written in concrete, steel, and glass. For decades, Manila's skyline was a familiar, almost static postcard. Today, that picture is being redrawn at a breathtaking pace. Cranes dot the horizon like metallic birds, working day and night to erect new condominiums, office towers, and sprawling malls. This construction boom is not confined to the capital. It radiates outward, touching cities like Cebu and Davao, and even reaching into once quiet provincial towns. This flurry of activity is fueled by a massive influx of capital, with a significant portion flowing from China, which has invested nearly $22 billion in the country between 2010 and 2023 alone. This wave of investment is tangible, visible in the infrastructure that is reshaping daily life for millions of Filipinos. For the first time since the 1990s, a modern passenger railway is being laid to connect Manila with the southern provinces, promising to slash travel times and decongest the capital's notoriously gridlocked roads. In flood-prone areas, new spillways and dams, funded by Chinese loans, have already proven their worth. During the typhoons of 2023, 2 such projects were credited with saving Manila an estimated $300 million in potential damages, a figure that represents countless homes and businesses spared from devastation. This is the promise of Chinese investment made real progress you can see, touch, and benefit from directly, changing the very landscape of the nation. Beyond the cities, this economic energy is galvanizing the country's industrial heartlands. Special economic zones are buzzing with newfound activity, driven by Chinese firms setting up shop to manufacture goods for the global market. These investments have reportedly created over 16,000 jobs in these zones, contributing to a significant 12% rise in exports from these areas. The Philippines is increasingly being viewed as a key China Plus One destination, a strategic location where companies can produce goods to bypass tariffs and diversify their supply chains away from mainland China. This positions the country to potentially capture a larger share of global manufacturing, a long-held ambition for Filipino economic planners. The sheer scale of this transformation has economists and international bodies taking notice. The World Bank, for instance, has projected that if the Philippines continues on its current path of reform and investment, it could sustain an impressive 6.8% annual GDP growth all the way through 2040. This isn't just an abstract number. It represents a pathway to a more prosperous future, a vision where the nation finally sheds its sick man of Asia label and emerges as a dynamic middle-income economy. The new airports, gleaming bridges, and thriving factories all point toward this brighter horizon, but they are just one side of a very complex and multifaceted story. The surge of Chinese investment into the Philippines did not happen overnight, nor did it occur in a political vacuum. Its origins can be traced back to a significant geopolitical pivot that began around 2016 under the administration of then-President Rodrigo Duterte. Seeking to move away from the country's traditional reliance on the United States, Duterte announced a separation from his long-standing ally and actively courted China, both as an economic partner and a regional power. This diplomatic realignment opened the floodgates for Chinese capital, which had previously been a minor player in the Philippine economy. Beijing responded enthusiastically, seeing a prime opportunity to advance its Belt and Road Initiative and strengthen its influence in a strategically vital Southeast Asian nation. This new golden age of Philippines-China relations saw a flurry of state visits, bilateral agreements, and ambitious project proposals. China pledged billions of dollars for President Duterte's flagship Build, Build, Build program, an ambitious infrastructure agenda aimed at modernizing the country's aging roads, bridges, railways, and airports. By 2022, China's share of all foreign investment stock in the Philippines had skyrocketed to 22%, a threefold increase from its share just a decade earlier. This rapid growth was not just a matter of private enterprise, it was a state-directed push, with Chinese state-owned enterprises leading the charge in securing major contracts, often with the full backing and diplomatic support of Beijing. The momentum continued even after the Duterte administration, although the tone of the relationship began to shift under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. While taking a stronger stance on maritime disputes in the West Philippine Sea, the Marcos administration has been careful not to completely shut the door on Chinese investment. the economic realities are hard to ignore. An additional $10 billion has been pledged for a new generation of projects, including more bridges, railway extensions, and crucial digital infrastructure like data centers. The economic logic is compelling. China offers vast pools of capital and the technical capacity to build big, build fast, and fill a critical infrastructure gap that has held back Philippine development for decades. This strategic courtship has created a complex dynamic. On one hand, the Philippine government saw a partner that could deliver transformative projects on a scale and speed that other partners might not match. On the other hand, Beijing saw a chance to expand its economic footprint, secure markets for its construction firms, and gain a strategic foothold in a country that sits at a crossroads of major maritime trade routes. The result is an embrace that is both powerful and potentially perilous, a relationship built on mutual economic interests, but shadowed by underlying geopolitical tensions and questions about the true long-term cost of this rapid development. For many ordinary Filipinos, the most immediate and tangible benefit of Chinese investment is the promise of employment. The construction sites for new railways, the factory floors of new electronics plants, and the operational hubs of new industrial parks all require workers. For instance, a new $500 million battery plant in Cavite alone is credited with creating 4,000 jobs, providing a vital source of income for families in the region. In a country where underemployment has long been a persistent challenge, the creation of thousands of new positions is a powerful and welcome development. These jobs represent a chance for a steady paycheck, a way to put food on the table, and an opportunity to participate in the nation's economic growth story. However, a closer look at the nature of these jobs reveals a more complicated and often disheartening picture. While thousands of roles are indeed being created, many of the highest-paying and most skilled positions, such as senior engineers, project managers, and technical supervisors, are frequently filled by Mandarin-speaking expatriates brought in from China. Filipino workers are often relegated to lower-wage, labor-intensive roles. Reports from the ground indicate that a local worker might earn as little as $250 a month, a wage that is barely enough to get by, especially in areas where the cost of living is rising. This creates a two-tiered system within the same company, fostering resentment and limiting opportunities for local talent to advance. This issue is compounded by a noticeable trend of wage compression. Studies have shown that the average pay in some Chinese-owned electronics factories can be as much as 18% lower than in their Japanese or Korean-owned counterparts operating in the same economic zones. This downward pressure on wages affects not only the workers directly employed by these firms but also the broader labor market, as other companies may feel less pressure to offer competitive salaries. Furthermore, labor practices have come under scrutiny. Rules within Philippine Economic Zone Authority areas allow foreign firms to bypass caps on temporary contract workers for their first 3 years of operation, leading to a state of precarious employment where job security is low and the ability to unionize and advocate for better conditions is severely limited. The social fabric of local communities is also being strained. The influx of workers and the development of new industrial parks have caused property prices and rental rates in surrounding areas to skyrocket, in some cases doubling in just a few years. This has pushed out longtime residents and local families who can no longer afford to live in their own communities. Adding to the friction are reports of Chinese-only establishments, such as restaurants and convenience stores, that cater exclusively to the expatriate community. These create social enclaves and fuel a sense of alienation among the local population, turning the promise of economic opportunity into a source of social division and resentment. While bridges and railways are the public face of Chinese investment, a more subtle and far more worrying trend is happening behind the scenes: the acquisition of significant stakes in the Philippines' most critical infrastructure. This goes beyond simple economics and ventures deep into the realm of national security. Perhaps the most alarming example is the country's power grid. The State Grid Corporation of China, a massive enterprise owned by the Chinese government, holds a 40% stake in the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. This ownership stake is not merely symbolic, it grants the Chinese firm board-level veto rights, giving it significant influence over the management and strategic direction of the entity that controls the flow of electricity to the entire nation. The potential risks associated with this arrangement are profound. a 2022 Senate hearing brought to light a chilling possibility that had long been a concern for security experts: the theoretical ability for the grid to be shut down remotely. Lawmakers and intelligence analysts have raised alarms that in a time of conflict or heightened geopolitical tension, this control could be weaponized, plunging parts of the country, including the vital economic and political hub of Luzon, into darkness. While NGCP has consistently denied that such a scenario is possible, the very fact that a foreign state-owned enterprise has such deep access to the nerve center of the nation's power supply remains a source of intense anxiety for policymakers and the military. The telecommunications sector presents a similar set of concerns. DITO Telecommunity, the country's third major telecom carrier, was launched to break the long-standing duopoly in the market and promised to bring better and cheaper services to Filipinos. However, the company is a partnership that includes China Telecom, a state-owned giant. Furthermore, DITO's parent conglomerate in China is known to build communication systems for the People's Liberation Army. This has raised serious questions about data security and the potential for espionage. With a 25-year license to operate, DITO is now handling communications for sensitive government bodies, including the National Police, airports, and even the armed forces, placing vast amounts of potentially sensitive data within a network partially controlled by a foreign power. These strategic investments on land are unfolding against a backdrop of escalating maritime tensions in the West Philippine Sea. Critics argue it is no coincidence that as China deepens its economic ties with Manila, its maritime actions have become more aggressive. Over 300 Chinese vessels are regularly spotted near the energy-rich Reed Bank, an area well within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Incidents of Chinese Coast Guard ships using water cannons against and ramming Filipino supply vessels near Second Thomas Shoal have become alarmingly frequent. This creates a troubling paradox where the Philippines is accepting economic help from the very country that is actively challenging its sovereignty at sea, making it difficult to formulate a coherent and firm response. The drive for rapid development, heavily financed by Chinese capital, is leaving a significant and potentially irreversible mark on the Philippine environment. While new infrastructure promises economic benefits, some of the flagship projects come with steep ecological price tags. A prime example is the construction of a 300-megawatt coal-fired power plant in Quezon Province. This project, made attractive by a Chinese loan with a low 1% fixed interest rate, is projected to spew an estimated 6 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere annually. This single plant directly undermines the Philippines' national commitment under international climate agreements to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by the year 2030, sacrificing long-term climate goals for short-term energy needs. Beyond the climate impact, concerns are mounting over governance and construction standards. Some of the major infrastructure projects have been awarded to Chinese contractors with questionable track records. For example, firms like China Harbor Engineering Company, which has been involved in major reclamation and port projects in the Philippines, were previously blacklisted by the World Bank for engaging in fraudulent practices like bid rigging. The presence of such companies raises red flags about the integrity of the procurement process and whether Filipino taxpayers are getting the best value and quality for the massive loans being undertaken in their name. This erosion of transparency is, honestly, a hidden cost of the rapid investment drive. Environmental advocacy groups and independent engineers have voiced even more direct concerns about the physical integrity of the new infrastructure. There are allegations that some contractors, in a rush to meet deadlines and cut costs, are using substandard materials and questionable building practices. These critics warn that such shortcuts could dramatically shorten the lifespan of new bridges, dams, and roads, potentially reducing their durability by as much as half. This would mean that structures designed to last for 50 years might begin to fail in 25, leaving a future generation of Filipinos to foot the bill for massive repairs or replacements, long after the initial loans were supposed to have been paid off. The governance signals from Manila have been worryingly mixed, creating an environment where these concerns can fester. On one hand, in a nod to transparency, the Philippine Congress passed a law requiring that the full contracts for all foreign-funded loans be published online for public scrutiny. This was a significant step toward accountability. However, in a seemingly contradictory move, the same legislative body approved a 25-year franchise extension for Dito Telecommunity, the telecom firm with Chinese state backing, without conducting a second public hearing to address the mounting security and operational concerns. Not all foreign loans are created equal, and the fine print on the agreement signed with China reveals terms that are often less favorable than those offered by the Philippines' other major development partners, such as Japan and the United States. While Chinese loans are often dispersed quickly, allowing projects to get off the ground with impressive speed, they typically come with higher interest rates. Compared to the near-zero interest rates offered by Japan, Chinese loans often carry rates of 2% or higher. This seemingly small difference can add up to hundreds of millions of dollars in extra interest payments over the life of a large-scale infrastructure project, placing a heavier burden on Filipino taxpayers. The repayment structures of Chinese loans also tend to be more rigid. The average repayment period for a Chinese loan is around 15 years, significantly shorter than the 25-year or longer terms offered by OECD countries and institutions like the World Bank. Furthermore, the grace periods, the time before principal repayments must begin, are also shorter, typically lasting only 3 years compared to the 7-year grace periods common with Japanese loans. This compressed timeline puts more immediate pressure on the Philippine government's finances, requiring it to generate revenue from the projects much faster, which isn't always feasible for long-term infrastructure like railways that take time to become fully operational and profitable. Perhaps one of the most significant and restrictive clauses found in many Chinese loan agreements is the requirement that a large portion of the project, often as much as 85%, must be procured from Chinese suppliers and contractors. This severely limits the local multiplier effect, which is the degree to which a large investment stimulates the domestic economy. Instead of creating a boom for Filipino construction companies, material suppliers, and engineering firms, a substantial portion of the loan money flows directly back to China. This practice stands in stark contrast to projects funded by partners like Japan, which often place a strong emphasis on using local labor and sourcing materials from the host country, ensuring the economic benefits are more widely distributed. Some Chinese loans also introduce novel and concerning forms of collateral. Instead of using physical assets, some agreements employ a method called cash flow securitization. This means that future revenue streams from a national asset are earmarked to repay the loan. For example, the loan for the Chico River Pump Irrigation Project included a clause that collateralized 8% of all future fees collected by the National Irrigation Authority. This essentially mortgages a portion of the nation's future income to a foreign creditor. This is a subtle but powerful form of leverage, creating a direct financial link between a Chinese lender and the operational revenue of a Philippine government agency. Whenever large-scale Chinese loans are discussed, the ominous phrase debt trap diplomacy is never far behind. The cautionary tale of Sri Lanka, which was forced to hand over its Hambantota port to a Chinese company on a 99-year lease after failing to service its debts, looms large in the public imagination. Naturally, many in the Philippines are asking if their country could be heading down a similar path. However, a closer look at the numbers suggests that the situation in the Philippines is, for now, fundamentally different. The country's total external debt to China currently stands at approximately 3% of its gross domestic product. This is a far cry from the 15% of GDP that Sri Lanka owed to China when it defaulted. It is also crucial to put China's lending in perspective. While China has become a more prominent creditor, it is by no means the Philippines' largest. As it stands, China holds about 11% of Manila's total external debt. In contrast, traditional lenders from the Paris Club, a group of major creditor countries including Japan, the United States, and Western European nations, collectively hold a much larger share at around 37%. This diversification of lenders gives the Philippines more financial flexibility and reduces its dependency on any single source of credit. As long as this balance is maintained, the risk of being cornered by a single creditor remains relatively low, providing a crucial buffer against the kind of pressure Sri Lanka faced. The Philippines also possesses a powerful economic shock absorber that many other developing nations lack: massive remittances from its overseas workers. The steady flow of money sent home by millions of Filipinos working abroad is a cornerstone of the national economy. In the last recorded year, these remittances totaled a staggering $36 billion. This enormous and reliable inflow of foreign currency provides the government with a stable resource to service its foreign debts, including those owed to China. This strong liquidity position is a key reason why international rating agencies currently consider the Philippines' risk of default to be low. The dedication of its global diaspora provides a unique and powerful defense against a debt crisis. Despite these mitigating factors, complacency would be a grave mistake. The danger is not necessarily in the current debt level, but in what could happen during a future crisis. A severe global recession, for example, could lead to a sharp drop in OFW remittances and a collapse in export demand, creating a sudden liquidity crisis for the government. It is in such a moment of vulnerability that the terms of Chinese loans could become truly perilous. If Manila were suddenly unable to make its payments, it might be forced into a debt restructuring negotiation from a position of weakness. This could open the door for China to demand concessions, such as long-term leases on strategic assets or greater control over critical infrastructure, turning a manageable risk into a full-blown sovereignty crisis. Faced with the dual realities of China's economic allure and its geopolitical assertiveness, the Philippine government has embarked on a complex and delicate diplomatic dance. This strategy, which some analysts have dubbed strategic flirtation, involves engaging with China for economic benefits, while simultaneously strengthening alliances with other global and regional powers to create a counterbalance. The goal is to avoid becoming overly dependent on Beijing and to preserve the country's strategic autonomy. This is not about choosing one side over the other, but about skillfully navigating the space between them to maximize the Philippines' national interest in a world of competing giants. The most important counterweight in this strategy remains the Philippines' long-standing alliance with the United States. In recent years, this partnership has been revitalized and deepened. Under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, the U.S. has been granted access to new and strategically located bases within the Philippines, enhancing the ability of both militaries to respond to regional threats. To back this up, Washington has also increased its military support, providing $100 million in security aid in March 2025 alone. This renewed American commitment sends a clear signal to the region that the U.S. stands by its treaty obligations, providing Manila with a crucial security umbrella as it deals with Chinese pressure in the West Philippine Sea. Beyond its traditional American ally, the Philippines is actively diversifying its partnerships, with Japan emerging as a particularly crucial player. In fact, Japanese official development assistance to the Philippines now outpaces the total value of Chinese loans. The projects funded by Japan serve as a direct and compelling alternative to Chinese offers. For example, the massive $9 billion North-South commuter railway project is being financed by Japan with a loan that carries an incredibly low 0.1% interest rate. Furthermore, the terms of Japanese assistance typically insist on adherence to high local labor standards and prioritize the hiring of Filipino workers, ensuring the economic benefits are shared more broadly. Manila is also looking further afield to build a wider coalition of partners who share its interest in maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. In a significant diplomatic move, President Marcos Jr. recently visited India to forge new security agreements. These talks included plans for joint naval patrols in the South China Sea, a development that adds another layer of complexity for Beijing's maritime ambitions. By engaging with a diverse set of partners, from the US and Japan to India and other Southeast Asian nations, the Philippines is weaving a web of relationships that gives it more leverage, more options, and a greater ability to resist being pulled too deeply into any single power's orbit. As the dust from the construction boom settles, the Philippines stands at a critical crossroads, facing two starkly different potential futures. The path it takes will be determined not by the sheer volume of Chinese money, but by the wisdom, discipline, and foresight with which it is managed. The first path leads to a future of inclusive growth and national renewal. In this optimistic scenario, the Philippine government leverages Chinese investment as just one part of a broader, diversified development strategy. It successfully enforces local hire rules, ensuring that high-quality jobs go to Filipinos. It manages its debt with prudence, avoiding the temptation of easy loans for non-viable projects, and maintains a healthy balance of creditors. In this brighter future, strong oversight and transparency become the norm. Every loan contract is publicly scrutinized, and corrupt practices are rooted out. The infrastructure built with foreign capital, be it Chinese, Japanese, or American, is of high quality, designed to last for generations and to truly serve the public good. This disciplined approach, combined with smart economic policies, could unlock the country's immense potential, sustaining 6% annual growth and expanding the middle class by an estimated 8 million people by 2030. In this version of tomorrow, the Philippines successfully uses Chinese capital to build its own future, not sell it, emerging as a stronger, more prosperous, and more resilient nation. The second path leads to a much darker destination, one of diminished sovereignty and difficult choices. In this scenario, the allure of fast and easy money leads to reckless borrowing and a lack of stringent oversight. Governance weakens, and sweetheart deals benefit a select few at the expense of the public. The country becomes overly reliant on China as its primary creditor. Then, an external economic shock, a global pandemic, a financial crisis, or a collapse in remittances, hits the economy. Suddenly, the government finds itself unable to service its mounting debts. This is the moment when the debt trap, once a distant fear, becomes a painful reality. Forced to the negotiating table from a position of extreme weakness, the Philippines could face demands for significant concessions. This might not be an outright seizure of territory, but something more subtle and insidious. 99-year leases on strategic ports, exclusive access to natural resources, or permanent control over parts of the nation's power and communications networks. The country would find its economic and foreign policy choices severely constrained by its creditor. In this bleak future, the infrastructure built with Chinese money serves as a constant reminder not of national progress, but of a national birthright that was traded away. The difference between these two futures lies not in Beijing's intentions, but in Manila's choices. Ultimately, whether Chinese investment builds or buys the Philippines depends on transparency, smart regulation, and the unwavering vigilance of the Filipino people themselves.